All right. Thanks so much for attending and watching this webinar on transforming data center site selection with geospatial intelligence. I'm Eileen. I'm from Pivvot, as I'm a client success specialist working directly with Pivvot clients. And we're also joined by Terracon, which is our parent company and partner on this webinar. So our presenters today are JJ Walzer and Jeff Magner. JJ is a senior client success specialist on the Pivvot team. JJ's background is in GIS geospatial and has worked in city planning, the nonprofit sector, and the mapping and satellite imagery industries. And JJ brings 20 years of experience to Pivvot, helping clients achieve greater success and efficiencies through Pivot's geospatial intelligence. You may have seen JJ briefly on the BBC History Channel series, Days That Shook the World, The Lincoln Assassination, as an actor on stage as Lincoln is shot. JJ is sorry that he could not do more to save President Lincoln. And Jeff Magner is also here and also not an actor, but very important to us. Jeff leads Terracon's digital infrastructure business sector, which includes the telecom and data center markets, where Terracon holds the top 20 ENR ranking. Terracon is an employee-owned consulting engineering company specializing in geotechnical engineering, environmental engineering due diligence, materials testing, special inspections, and facilities engineering, with over 150 offices across the US. Jeff has more than 30 years of industry experience in consulting engineering and project management, assisting clients with exploring below the surface to identify, understand, and mitigate risks that can impact both project costs and schedule. Success for our clients is driven by Terracon's vision, where we are best at people, we lead innovation, and we are dominant in our market. And so with that, I'm going to hand it over to JJ to start us off.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Eileen. And Eileen is a wonderful client success specialist here at Pivvot, my colleague, to which I could not be successful without her help. So thank you very much, Eileen. All right. Okay. So you attended today. Thank you very much. What are you attending? Well, it's the geospatial intelligence benefits for data center siting. So really what we're going to cover today is kind of how looking at different data layers and putting them together using that geospatial intelligence can really help to mitigate risks early, look at analyses quickly, save you time from on-site visits, save time from future or potential future issues, be able to share data and project management with others, and of course, really get a strategic edge on your competition, right? You all want to know, how can you do this quickly, most affordably, and get the greatest benefits. So hopefully we'll cover all that for you here today. First, though, I want to cover that Terracon is a firm believer in a safety environment. So we focus a lot on safety. And so what we have is an IIF. Anytime we have a call or a meeting that has 4 or more individuals on it, we share an IIF moment, which is incident and injury free. So for this one today, I just want to put out there to remind everybody about distracted driving, right? So while it's Terracon's policy to not chalk or text or do those extraneous things while driving, so your focus is solely on driving, you just always want to remind people that when you are texting, you're taking your focus away from the road. When you're eating, you're taking your focus away from the road. So we can all be better, safer drivers by simply just limiting our time while driving to just focusing on the road. So hopefully that's a little helpful moment for you all. But that is part of our culture, so thank you for indulging us. So you've come here today, and Eileen has let you know background on me, background on Jeff, but really I want to kind of cover why listen to us, what makes us worthy of your time when talking about geospatial intelligence. So from the Pivvot standpoint, Pivvot is an organization that's been in existence about 7 years with the intention of really compiling and pulling numerous data sets across the United States together to be able to standardize them, kind of remove duplicates, make sure that naming conventions are similar, right? So we can have all these data sets, pulling them together so that we can then, on top of that, build the geospatial algorithms that can really sort through all that data quickly to determine what's going on, whether that's proximity to transmission lines, whether that's soil types, whether that's is there federal land, and trying to figure out what's happening, or if you're putting down a transmission line, route line, things like that, what's the best routing line for that that's going to save the most amount of money, things like that. So we've been working for numerous years on really how to compile all that for the benefit of you, the user, making sure again that we're pulling together those data sets, making sure that we're refreshing them every 30 days up to 90 days. So they're constantly getting refreshed. So you know that they're good, they're available, they're consistent. So that's really what Pivvot has come about. So as we're using these data sets and producing reports and things like that, we've worked with a lot of clients and gained a lot of experience in how to improve those processes. Now, a few years ago, Pivvot was bought by Terracon, and I'll let Jeff get into describing Terracon there. But with Terracon's 60 years of experience, they're a great asset. Jeff, go ahead and
yeah. Hey, thanks, JJ. You bet.
Yeah.
Yeah, so whereas Pivvot is that initial step for site selection, and once you've found suitable sites, you can utilize Pivvot to determine usable area on those sites. It's kind of early entry. Terracon has, as JJ mentioned, 60 years of experience, tens of thousands of feet of geotechnical exploration borings, numerous phase 1 data information from environmental sources, threatened endangered species, cultural natural resources. So we have several of the key layers of data that can go into Pivvot that JJ was discussing earlier. So Terracon then is kind of that next step for your geotechnical environmental experts. So once you've selected a site and determined its usable area, Terracon can step in, and we have a product called Stage 1. Stage 1 uses the data from all the geotechnical borings on the site or adjacent to the site, environmental data, both privately held, provided by the client, or publicly available information. And we can develop a high-level report that can provide you a lot of information in regards to site conditions, geotechnical conditions, groundwater, bedrock, soft soils, mining, subsurface karst features, a lot of that. Also, potential for permits required for threatened endangered species, wetlands, all of this information that are typically roadblocks to development can be assessed at a high level. Again, this is desktop, so we're not putting people on the site. You can be completely anonymous doing these due diligence, early stage due diligence investigation, and the information that we're utilizing is then put to use for the client's early look at the site. We're also utilizing that information to help the client develop future scope as they enter into their due diligence. So, and when I say develop scope, like a smart scope, if we know more about the subsurface conditions from all this historic data, we can actually put together a much better geotechnical scope or better predict some of the permitting that's going to be required on the site. So why would you do this? Certainly this is going to allow this is what allows our clients more efficient use. It's fast, right? So it's efficient and it's fast, and it's also helping them find sites, select more usable sites for their needs without getting too far down, without the train getting too far down the track, I guess, so to say, with spending time and, more importantly, sometimes money on sites. They can weed them out. Fail fast, I guess, is the key.
Yeah, and it's really, thanks, Jeff, because it's just, with 180 locations across the US, again, with all those projects, with all that work, with all the borings that are occurring, it's just this wealth of data over the years. So with Pivvot and Terracon together, we really understand the value of data, having data early, and how to kind of process that data to give you the analysis, to give you the information that you need as quickly as possible to then make decisions and move things forward. So we've been doing this a while. So I think hopefully you can trust us in terms of when we're talking about why using geospatial intelligence, pulling all that together is important. Now I'm going to hand it back over to Jeff and really get into talking about data centers and kind of why geospatial intelligence is important for data centers.
Yeah, so right now, what we're seeing is with the boom of AI, it's fueling this data center, I call it a gold rush, to stake claim on land. Particularly, they're chasing power, right? So power is one of the key needs for development for data centers because they use a fair amount. Other key needs are going to be water and certainly a connection to fiber. But really, it's really power that's generating the biggest constraint right now. If you look at nationwide, with the demand increasing, it's actually the constraint around power right now is actually having an impact on development. But there's lots happening in the power industry right now. So think about where is the power going to come from? Well, right now, with the plenty of gas, natural gas is plentiful in the U.S. So if you can stand up a natural gas generation station, which has a much smaller footprint than a solar farm or a wind farm, and the reason I mention that is because data centers love renewable energy. They want to make sure they're making best use of renewables as possible. The need for power, though, is more than what typically renewables can provide. Plus, think about maintaining a base load of power to run and you can get that from gas, right? Or you can get it from coal-fired power plants or nuclear power plants that are existing. So, so when you're looking at that, if the near-term future is gas, you're going to need to know where are gas lines, where is gas pipelines available. We're seeing a lot of data center siting occurring where pipelines are available, and particularly in parts of the country where some gas production is prevalent. So think about Texas, Oklahoma, Louisiana. Think about Ohio, Pennsylvania. I mean, these are some of the areas that have plentiful gas, some of the production basins. So we're seeing a lot of activity in those areas. But there are also pipelines running all over. So having a good understanding of where those pipelines are is also a good way to tap into where you're going to be able to find that available natural gas. I do think if you look out ahead in the future, certainly power is going to be getting more diverse. I mean, there's lots of other, hydrogen fuel cell, but I think the big one is going to be nuclear power. So if you think about some people think as soon as 5 years, some people think it's more like 10 or 15 years before it really starts to take off. But that seems to be what a lot of people are talking about for power in the future. So it's a big deal for data center development. Water also is a need. Think of all the cooling that they need. So having an understanding of what the infrastructure is around water distribution, ability to extract water from the ground, ability to be located near a river or a lake, reservoir for that source of water. Data centers are getting built better at less use of water or recycling of water, but it's still a need, and you can't really get the data center development without it. Fiber has a network all over the United States of fiber, but it has to be certain capacity, and certainly that's one of the data layers that would be useful when doing siting is having a good understanding of the fiber network in the locale that you're looking for. So again, those are some key needs for development. There are also some things that data centers would want to have, right? Certainly incentives, community buy-in is big. Understanding the permit process and how to expedite permits. If the permit process takes too long, that can derail the project. So certainly having a good understanding of which permits are required and an understanding of how to expedite that is important. And then of course, it's nice to have favorable site and subsurface conditions, because you have shallow bedrock and you're having to do a lot of blasting, or shallow groundwater and a lot of drainage, or maybe just really poor soft soil conditions requiring long-term settlement requirements for soils to consolidate as you're doing site grading. There's a number of things that can impact the schedule and cost of a site related to the subsurface conditions. So you can spend money on it, but it's sometimes the time it takes to fix or remedy these conditions can derail projects. So
Yeah.
again, these are some of the
Thanks.
key things that go into data center development.
Yeah, and I would even ask you, the viewers watching this, and feel free to reach out to us with response as well. But what is the most important factor when considering a site for you, right? So based on our experience, we're listing some here, but what is it that's going to make that uh, to make that more valuable to you? So that would challenge that. And so just to talk about site selection process considerations. So, in the context of this webinar, again, we're saying, how do you pull in all this data? How do you use geospatial intelligence, right? So not just the data, but how do you pull it in together to really help this process, right? Because data centers, the market is becoming competitive. You look at Northern Virginia and they're running out of space in which to put data centers, right? We know that the federal government is opening up some federal lands for data centers that folks would have to apply for and see. So how do you put it all together, and how do you act quickly to make sure you're getting that competitive advantage on others? Well, so first in the site selection process, we really are looking at how to search and or refine, right? So data exploration, you need the data. I mean, that's the first thing is, to Jeff's point, you need to know where fiber lines are or the parcels, so you know what you're dealing with. You need federal lands, you need water bodies, you need all of these data sets. And yeah, a lot of them are freely available, but you still have to then collect them and get them all into the same platform and, run the analysis. So it could be really time consuming, but that's going to be absolutely important. Then you're going to start looking at sites and trying to figure out, all right, maybe I've got 5 sites in mind, but how do I compare them? How do I know how one site differs from the other? And how do I make a quick decision on kind of where to focus my time and energy, right? As Jeff was saying, that as things progress, as you get into development and get into construction, like there's a lot of costs. So you want to mitigate all that in the beginning. And so, everybody may have their own way of doing so, but at least, here at Pivot, we've taken to be able to kind of seek different sites based on certain parameters, right? So you can look for sites that are within distances of substations, power lines, data centers, wetlands, fiber optic cables, right? So we really want what's the fastest way, again, to hone in, because in the competitive market, speed is going to be of the essence. So those are things to consider, when pulling your data sets together. Then, of course, throughout this process, you want to have a due diligence, right? So you're going to be working with a number of people. So how can you easily share projects through different people on your team, or through you and the client, or you and the developer, whatever the team's involved? How do you make sure that everybody's looking and working off the same information? How do you know how to check the environmental conditions? So if there are environmental constraints by which have to be followed, how do you know that you're adhering to them, again, early enough to mitigate any future risks, which is the next bullet. And then, of course, how are you showcasing this information, right? Whether it's how are you reaching out to the different parcel sites? How do you show to others what the constraints are, to really visualize and see what those constraints are, right? And then how do you document this all? How do you get snapshots of all the data that you are using to be able to show it later on and say, well, this, our estimates, our decisions, our process came from this data, right? So all that's going to be part of due diligence. So that's kind of the next step. And then you get into development, right? So now you're starting to move forward, right? So maybe somebody's going to visit a site, and they're going to collect data and bring it back. That helps. But instead of having to visit 100 sites, which is where you started, they're only visiting 5 sites because you've already kind of looked at 95 and narrowed it down through the geospatial intelligence process. Right? The visual, I mentioned project management. So that's visual project management. Again, it's not just sharing spreadsheets or, Gantt charts and, things like that. It's a visual, like to say, hey, there's our site, and here's information that we can share with different people. And then, of course, being able to report and have dashboards that people can see, right? So these are all part of the site selection process that you really want to consider. And there's a number of ways, of course, to go about this, but I do think that these are things to pay attention to. I mentioned having the data. So having the data is gonna be just key, right? Pulling all those data sets together. Most of these data sets you see are freely available. And so people are always say, like, well, I can go and grab them anytime, but you still need somebody to go and grab them. You need someplace to store them. You need to make sure that it's symbolized correctly so everybody can understand, right? So it's going to be important to have your data sets, however you decide to do it. So Pivvot has already taken all these data sets. And so what you can see highlighted in black bold are just some of the data sets that we actually create using some of that Terracon boring data to enhance data sets, right? So some of the data is proprietary in ours. Those highlighted in yellow are data sets that I think that will most likely be important for anybody looking for, doing data center site selection, right? So it's all different data sets that you want to have access to quickly and together, again, so that you can be efficient, it can be consistent, and you can, make those decisions and mitigate any risks. So having that data is going to be very important. And I've given a lot of background in terms of the data that's necessary, but what I want to do now is just dive into what does it mean when I say geospatial intelligence? Like, how do you utilize all those different data layers? So I'm going to back out of here really a second and find my window that is timing out. Hopefully I'm saved myself. So what you're looking at here is the Pivvot platform, specifically for siting. We actually have a platform specific to routing, so if you're doing transmission lines, pipelines, things like that. We have a platform that aids that process, and we also have a platform we call Aware, which is just kind of an entry level of like getting in, seeing what's happening, pulling standardized reports on a number of different data sets. But this here that you're looking at is our siting platform. So let's just say, for example, you've come in and you want to build a data center, or you're going to consult or help somebody build a data center, right? So you're looking at the entire United States. Going back to those data sets, first you have to have the data sets, because you want to start thinking, where do I go, right? I already said Northern Virginia is already maxed out. So kind of based on, so Jeff had given a suggestion of looking at Texas. And again, this is just based on kind of trends of what's happening. So as we zoom in, you know, if you go out towards like West Texas and say you get to the Lubbock area, well, now you're just looking at a map. So this happens to be Google Maps, but using again those data sets, the first thing you can do is look and see, where do data centers already exist, right? Do they exist certain places? I'm going to turn this on satellite view and get rid of these labels to make it a little bit more clear. But as I see here that, you know, this data set exists, and now you can see, oh, they have a data center. They have a couple data centers, right? So you already know that Lubbock has data centers. So maybe the community sentiment is more accepting of data centers. We know that it can be challenging to come into new communities. So, all right, this is potential then. As Jeff mentioned too, that you're going to need power, right? So what if we say, all right, that was substations. Well, data centers. Let me look at substations. And I actually have that turned on already, but just to show you the symbology, it's all these dots here, right? So you can go in and then start saying, I want a substation that's going to be high voltage. So that you're going to base it off of that, right? So you start looking through, and again, you're using those data sets. So, okay, here's a substation that's high voltage. And then I've turned on some other layers here that you can see power lines, right? What are the power lines information? And there's tons of other things you can look at here as well. So you can look at fiber layers, because again, we know we want to have fiber in the area, right? So if I drop this down, you can see that. So here we have different fibers. So we're like, okay, this might be a good site. So first we just put in a point and then say, you know what, within 5 miles, show me all the parcels greater than 1,000 acres, because this is where I'm going to need to start, right? And you can do it by smart parcel or tax parcel. Tax parcel is going to be every tax parcel there is. Smart parcel is going to be it's a Pivvot data set where we have combined the tax map parcels by owner, right? So if one person happens to own 10 adjacent parcels, then that might be a better way of kind of conducting your site than looking at the individual tax parcels, right? So we want to maybe look by owner, because again, those adjacent parcels, one owner, if they own 2 parcels that are 500 acres each, we've hit our 1,000 acres. So we're going to do that. And then you just plug it in, and you can see here that there's a number of different searches you can do. You can look at, you know, a certain distance from substations, a certain distance from power lines, right? So I could turn these on, and then you can go in here and say, you know what, I'm only looking for parcels that are near extra high voltage substation or high voltage, right? And same thing for power lines, right? So because all these data sets have attributes of metadata, you can kind of refine. So again, this is that geospatial intelligence. It's not out yet, but in about a month, Pivvot's going to be releasing again. I was mentioning the availability to do this, to go by find parcels from distance to water bodies, data centers, fiber lines, transportation networks, right? So we're always trying to improve how these algorithms can help people find what they need even faster. I'm going to go ahead and turn on the parcellator here because I did my search results, and you can see now that I've got 4 search results. So these red lines are the smart parcels, and highlighted in green here are those that meet these specifications that are larger than 1,000 acres, and are within 5 miles of this substation. So now, just visually even, I can go through and start looking at these different sites and see, oh, look at that, a fiber line runs up here. And that was one of my selected sites there. Down here, you got, okay, it's close to power lines, right? You can turn on pipelines to see, all right, what do so existing pipelines? And you can click the drop down and say, okay, here's a pipeline. And you're like, oh, seems to go right through the middle of this. Do I want a pipeline going right through the middle of that particular parcel? And I'm going to unclick these. And so you kind of get that visual representation. So I just ran it quickly again to get the other parcels, but you can see that this pipeline's going through this parcel. And there's also an airport. So like, maybe that's not where I want to build my data center, right? So visually, you can turn on and off a number of layers to see what might work and what might not work. Additionally, you can click down and start reviewing all these different data sets and pull different reports to get an idea of what's on that particular data set. Or you add them to your project site, and now we can actually go yet another step further. So once we've selected certain parcels, now we can look at usable areas. So we have all these 4 parcels. What's usable on those layers, right? So you can change all these settings. You can go into land cover and you can say forest is usable, different attributes are usable, water is not usable, right? You can do the same for slope and look at, you know what? It's going to cost us a lot of money if we have to take a 10% slope and grade it down flat. So let's just exclude that. We can look by, if you happen to be adding a solar panels or a solar site nearby, you can look at parcels that only face to the south. They get that maximum sunlight, right? So once you have the data, you can kind of manipulate in so many different ways. Well, once you do that and you calculate it, then you get another step here. So for these 4 areas that say, what's the usable area, right? So initially it says, okay, what's the total acreage? But of that, what's actually useful? And so you can then compare all of these. And so, for example, I'm going to go to this one here and I'm going to map it. Because again, we kind of ruled out 2 of these sites because of the pipeline. So we got really these 2 sites remaining. But this one here seems to have a great usable area, right? It's got a transmission line already running right next to it. So you can look at what all the results are for this. So, and again, all this was done in minutes. And so now you can see what's usable. What's not, what's happening on these properties to very quickly take a very large search and narrow it, right? So now that you have this information, you can run different reports if you just want to have information. So we have a parcel report. We have a permitting report. You can run crossing reports. What am I talking about? Let me show you examples. So for example, the permitting report. So this is that parcel. Hit the button, it runs, it gives you a list of potential federal permits that might be triggered that you would have to deal with later down the line should you go with this property, right? So again, it's part of that risk mitigation and due diligence. You can run a parcel report. So here you can see that usable area. We have our site, the acreage, what's usable. But now we're going to scroll down, and now we're seeing of all those data sets, what's there, what's not there, what do I need to worry about, what do I not need to worry about, right? Imagine it. This is one example, but imagine if you're doing this a number of times over, right? So having the ability to have all those data sets in one spot and be able to pull reports, narrow things down quickly is gonna be essential. In addition, you can do comparison reports, right? So I've got these 4 properties. So if you're still on the fence of which to choose, you can run a comparison report. And now you've got the 4 properties, and you can go through all those data sets and see how they compare, right? You can easily download this. You can also do a detailed report to see, how do these things affect each of the property themselves. So each of these layers. So again, existing pipelines, right? So you can get an idea of what's happening where. So it gives you that functionality because the intelligence, the algorithm is built in. And just to show you what it looks like, here's the comparison report in CSV, right? Same information, but now you can work with it like that. Here is that detail report. So if I can get it here, come on. This is tricky. There we go. You got it for a second. And then you can also do site contacts as well. So if I close this one out, since we've already seen this, that's going to make my life easier, hopefully, unless it just closed out all Excel spreadsheets there. But yeah, you get the point. So going back to the map now, so again, you're playing around, but I mentioned that you could share things. So here's my account, but you could easily come in and start sharing these with other people on your team, right? So now they can log in, they can see the same thing, right? So you can download all the data that exists here. You can download just the project data to be able to, again, it's that due diligence. It's that being able to show what's happened. So for example, if you want to download a site boundary in KMZ, you could easily upload that to Google Earth. And now here are, again, those 4 sites. Here's the one site where we saw the pipeline going through. Here's the one site now that we are looking at. And it's got a couple water bodies. So we know that those are the constraints, but most of it's usable area, right? So you can easily share this with other people and build upon what's already in Google Earth, right? So having all these data sets together, that's the intelligence part, right? So you could do this in ArcGIS. You could do this in other platforms, but then you have to create all this, right? So and that's what you want to do. You want to have it all created so things run smoothly and quickly. And then as you make changes, you can easily make changes, adjust, recalculate, and have new information. Jeff, is there anything that you would suggest that I'm missing in terms of explaining why it's important to have these data sets, have them be consistent, have them be available, and be able to run these types of analyses?
No, I think you've done a good job here, JJ, of showing the many different layers. And I think what is beneficial is that it's all in one platform and you're able to set constraints, because often and the flexibility of setting the constraints, like for instance, I need to be within a half mile of a certain, like say a 345 kV line for my project to be successful, or I need to be within 2 miles of a natural gas pipeline for the project to be successful, because running transmission and or new gas pipeline can again engage additional permits, right, to run the linear project to get to your site. So I think that's important. And then once you've defined sites like you show here, really being able to understand what is the usable area, of the site is important. Again, because sites that have a number of cultural natural resource issues, whether it's wetlands or threatened endangered species, again, can get in the way of permitting and timelines required that can impact the success of the project.
And so,
But yeah,
Jeff,
the flexibility of the site is really nice.
And Jeff, as you were talking, I was just going through, and like there's just a number of different data sets that can be turned on and off to really, again, understand what's happening, with the goal of allowing you to just look at all this very quickly, very easily. And then the other things that are even more helpful is that you can add sketches to these sites, right? So once you have sites, you can add, and I mentioned you could share, but how do you add sketches to it to like present key information? So when you're talking about project management, when you're talking about due diligence, how do you put that there? You can put in project comments, right? So again, easily share with a number of people. You can see that there's rankings here, there's status here, right? So you can manipulate those that, you know, are ranking for your team means a certain thing. So everybody knows that, you know, something ranked a certain way is going to be the focus, right? Or a certain status given is going to be able to be read and seen by anybody you're sharing with. So again, the beauty of kind of doing geospatial analyses is how do you take all this information and how do you present it very easily, whether in map form, whether in, again, looking at it in table form, whether going back to, you know, certain reports in a CSV. So here was the contact list, right? So making everything fast and easy is really the goal. To be able to succeed faster. And I'm going to scroll through because it just started at the beginning again. So yeah, so that was the demo, and that's what Pivvot can do. And again, with Terracon's help, we can get a lot of information. But I don't want to just say what Pivvot can do. I would love to work with you if you would like, as with Terracon. But in general, I do stand by that. This is the process that really needs to occur to be able to have those data sets, to be able to know kind of throughout the project lifecycle what's going to happen. It's going to allow you to mitigate those risks, right? By knowing very early on, you know, you'll be able to set up and save that money, right? It's fast. You don't have to visit all the different sites. In the example that I showed, you know, it pulled up 4 sites and we narrowed it down to 2. Maybe you visit 2 sites instead of 4. Again, and that's a small scale. If you're doing this on a larger scale, like that's a huge time savings, right? And then being able to visualize all that and compare and to share with others, right? It's invaluable. And ultimately, it's going to make your processes efficient, consistent, and collaborative. So that's our story. I do think it's important. I am a GIS geospatial nerd, so I really want to thank you. These are things I could probably show and talk about all day long. So thank you very much for your time. Right there at the bottom here, you can see our emails. So by all means, feel free, reach out, ask us questions, tell us what site, you know, what data sets are most important for you when on site selecting for data centers. Ask us questions, see if we can help. That's really it. Again, I want to put a big thanks to Jeff and Eileen for helping out today as well. Yeah, and thank you all very much for stopping by. Have a wonderful day.